Good afternoon. I'm with Kathy Dokis in her home. Thank you, Kathy, for accepting to do this. I know you're a busy person. So let's move to the first question. We'd like to hear a little bit about yourself, your credo, your passion, your principles.
Sure. Well, thank you for having this opportunity to talk with you today. And so Kathy Dokis and Dejnakaz, Dokis First Nation Donjaba, in Niswakamok and Deda, Anishinaabe, Kwe and Dao. So my name's Kathy Dokis. I'm a member of Dokis First Nation. I pretty much always lived in Sudbury. I was born in Oshawa, but came to Sudbury very young. So grew up in Sudbury, and I'm an Anishinaabe woman. A little bit about me. Well, first of all, I grew up in Sudbury, went to school in Sudbury, did my post-secondary education at Laurentian. I was married for a time, and I have two beautiful children. My daughter's 28 and my son is 26. My family, I have First Nation on my father's side. His father was from Dokis First Nation, and my father's mother was from Nipissing First Nation. And on my mother's side, we're Irish, Scottish, Welsh kind of mix. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's a good mixture.
Yes. So I would say my biggest passion has always been children. Like from the time I was a very little girl, I always loved children. And so that's just always been a passion for me in my life. And so I think that's probably what led me into the teaching field. But also really important to me is about how I carry myself. And I've always tried to carry myself in a good way. I always remember my mother telling me from a very young age the importance of relationships. And, you know, sometimes it's hard to have a positive relationship with everyone. That's sometimes challenging. But she always taught me that no matter what, it's important to maintain good relationships with everyone, even when it's difficult. So that's I guess, a principle that I carry for myself and that I've always tried and I've always advocated for in the work that I do, is the importance of relationships. The other thing I would say that is really important to me is supporting students or children who have been faced with challenges or barriers or maybe have experienced traumas in their life. And so as a result, they have a harder time maybe being successful, whether it be in education or in other areas of their life. So I've always had a passion for, in particular, supporting children with those challenges and barriers.
It helps.
Yeah, I loved what I did.
Yeah.
I loved getting out of bed. I was at work usually by 7:30 in the morning, and I loved my job. So after the 1 year of being a principal, that's when in 2007, the ministry released the First Nation Métis Inuit policy framework.
Yes.
And we had been at a principal session where we learned of that policy was being released the following year. At the tail end of 2006, we found out about it, and I believe it was released early in 2007.
You're right. Yes.
So by the fall, so I was already, that was during my first year as a principal, and towards the spring of 2007, shortly after its release, our director at the time put out an email, well, it came from a superintendent, to all principals saying, you know, expression of interest. Anyone interested in, they were creating a system level principal job to do the implementation of First Nation Métis Inuit policy framework. And honestly, I almost fell out of my chair. And then I think one of the first things I really focused on was building the Ojibwe language programs and the Native Studies programs in language in elementary and secondary, and the Native Studies programs in secondary. So, was doing a lot of recruiting and looking for language teachers to bring them into the system. So grew the programs significantly across the board, elementary and secondary.
And you were the first one implementing this. So it had to be hard. A lot of challenges, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then just over time, all the educating, right? Providing different learning opportunities for staff and students across the board to help them, just at the beginning, it was awareness because some people didn't even know.
Exactly.
We had a residential school guest speaker early on, and one of my colleague principals came up to me after, and she said, I had no idea of these schools. Like she said, how can this be? Like, I'm a grown adult living in this country and I didn't know this. So at the beginning, it was just a lot of educating and awareness for staff and students, growing the language programs, the Native Studies programs. Importantly, I wanted to hear from students early on, so had opportunities to connect with First Nation students, First Nation, Métis or Inuit students, and get their voices. And one of the first things they told me was we need support workers in the school. We started hiring. We started with 4. Definitely rewards in that portfolio or in that position as the the name changed a few times.
Yes.
I have a colleague friend that would always say that government, people will say to us, why do you keep changing your name? And we're like, it's not us, it's the government. And a colleague of mine always says, government keeps having naming ceremonies without us. Successes or rewards, always related to the students when you made a difference in their lives. Early on I had a board-wide youth group, Indigenous youth group, and to see them flourish and have opportunities that they may not have ever taken part in for various reasons, just not comfortable or, because they didn't have that sense of belonging, but they were able to gather with other Indigenous students and have learning opportunities, get out on the land and learn and start to learn more about who they were, their identity, and see that reflected in the school. And that was always rewarding. So I created programming for Indigenous students, and as much as I could, taught by Indigenous teachers. So coming out of grade 8 during the summer, they could do, we started with the Careers in Civics course because we knew that was a course that all students in the province tended to be a course that they were not highly successful in. So coming out of grade 8, students could sign up, and we started they're learning with a big canoe trip. We went up in Killarney Park with Great Lake Cultural Camps. I actually went with them, and it was a great bonding experience. And then they did learning about careers in civics from an Indigenous lens. Of course, they learned about Western ways as well, but they also had the opportunity, the priors, learning about Indigenous, governance and visiting and hearing from chiefs, going into the communities, visiting with chief and council or elders in community. And so learning in a way that was more comfortable for them, that was more inclusive of who they were, seeing themselves reflected in the curriculum. The feedback from that was really good, and that kind of grew over time, that program. More students, more locations we were holding and stuff. So anywhere where you had an opportunity to make a difference for students, yes, they wanted Indigenous included, but it couldn't come directly from our perspective or my perspective, our way of seeing things or doing things. It had to just fit into their way. And I didn't really realize at first that's what was happening. It was like I just had to take what was being done from a non-Indigenous perspective and sprinkle it with something Indigenous. And that wasn't right.
Because you were a pioneer in all of this. You led it.
Mm-hmm. I always said it didn't have to be me. If you don't think I'm the right person to be at senior team and have a voice for Indigenous staff and students and families in the board, then find somebody. But you need Indigenous voice. And we talked about before, we know the funding was to be, there was funding for supervisory officer level position.
Yes.
But no boards did that. No
That's
boards.
true.
And why? Why didn't they? Right? So, I would say I always struggled with, I felt I didn't have a voice, but I thought it was me. I thought I wasn't good enough. Maybe I wasn't smart enough. I felt like I didn't really fit in. but I came to learn later on that there actually wasn't a safe place created for me to use my voice. And that's why I did. And I was actually told by someone at the board that I didn't talk enough. And so, I'm like, okay, like I'm not good enough, right? Because I don't talk enough. But I always love the quote by the Dalai Lama. It says, he said, when you talk, you're just repeating something that you already know. When you listen, you're going to learn something new.
Mm-hmm. It's so true.
Right? And that's the other thing I always pride myself on, is being a good listener. Mm-hmm. But I also don't think I had the space was there for me to have a voice. And so, yeah, that was hard. Mm-hmm. And towards the end of my career, in those last couple of years, I did use my voice because I had over time, I had a lot more experiences, right? And you just grow, right? You grow. And, I had some great role models in my life that I, was able to listen to and watch and learn from. And in those last couple of years, I used my voice. I always use it in a respectful way, mm-hmm. but I used it very strongly. Yeah. But it didn't really make a difference.
So I'll ask you to speak to your involvement mm-hmm. in other things, because as you're way too young to just retire.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, right.
Well, and I was still, just eager to do more. So prior to retiring, I became aware of a position at Public Health in Sudbury. They had created a director, which is like the equivalent of a superintendent position at the school board. So they had created a director of Indigenous Public Health. So long story short, that's where I am. So I took my 2 weeks after I retired at Christmas, usual Christmas holiday, and then I started right after Christmas at Public Health. I do have a more flexible schedule mm-hmm. that I have, but because I wanted to feel a little bit retired. But I feel like there's safe space for me there to have a voice. Good. And I'm like, I do have a voice and I am using it. And one of the most exciting things about the work that I'm doing there is I'm having the opportunity to get at the root cause of, what makes our systems inherently racist. They're built from European, Western, white values, which historically excludes Indigenous people and people of color, right? So mm-hmm. it's not the people in the system, it's the structure, right?
The structure.
And so I'm really excited to have the opportunity. We're just going to be launching a project in early 2025 called Unlearning and Undoing White Supremacy and Systemic Racism. It's a project that's come from British Columbia in the Provincial Medical Officer of Health office in British Columbia. So they've been very kind to, we're the first people out of jurisdiction that are getting to implement this project in Ontario. Yeah.
Now, with all your doings through your journey, what advice would you give to the younger generation?
Mm-hmm. It comes to voice again, because I felt that, I wish I had found a way to use my voice sooner, but I have it now and I'm using it. So I would say to the younger ones, don't be scared to use your voice, always in a respectful way, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's really important. And it can be hard. It's easier said than done. It can be hard. So maybe find those role models and mentors that can help guide you, in difficult situations, and maybe help you to feel more confident and comfortable to use the voice. And I would also say for Indigenous students specific, I know there's a lot of youth out there that are getting involved in things and saying that I've done, like trying to move forward this work. Yeah. And it is really hard, but it is really important. Not that all this should be falling obviously on our shoulders, this truth and reconciliation, yes. right? We need the non-Indigenous people to be doing their part.
Yes.
Right? But we know that, Indigenous people, are doing a lot of work in a lot of institutions or in the community or wherever it may be. And it's important work, but it is really difficult. So my advice to the youth that are doing this work and getting involved is to first of all, take care of yourself. Make sure you have people in your life, or an elder, or family members, or close friends that you can share, because it can be hard sometimes. But also I always say that our ancestors did the work to make it better for us, and had a lot worse to deal with, right?
Yes.
And so now I feel, and that's why I continue doing this work, is, even though it's been really hard sometimes, and it's hard on your spirit, it's my turn, right? And I'm trying to do what I can do to make it better for the generations coming. And so at some point, right, the young ones, and that's what I would tell my staff too. Sometimes they would be struggling, and I'd remind them of that, right? Yeah, we have to take care of ourselves, take care of each other, but we're doing it to make things better for future generations. Yeah.
Looking back at your journey, is there anything you do different? And then what is the thing you cherish the most?
The thing I cherish the most is just, it always comes back to kids, my opportunity to work with kids and make a difference in the lives of children. And of course, with the Indigenous specific work, trying to do my part to make a difference in the lives of Indigenous people in our community and maybe beyond, right? And anything I would do differently? Probably not. Like, I don't know, nothing that's jumping out at me.
Learning through the journey is always exciting.
Yeah. I've certainly learned a lot throughout my career, and I'll continue to keep learning, and I hope to be able to keep giving back to community and in different ways, even if I'm not formally working at some point, which hopefully at some point I'm not, but just always want to be able to give back, right?
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nicole.